very huge treat. And yeah, Tito, I'll let you take it away.
Great. I actually think it's fitting that you couldn't remember my title because it's kind of a made-up title, which I'll get into in a moment, and it has to do with this training. So thank you for that lovely introduction, Maddie. I'm just going to do a little more about me for anyone who doesn't know or isn't as familiar with me. So yes, I am the creative manager at NPR Seattle. I basically design, report, research, or oversee anything that is visual on our website and our social and our interactive work. It's a catch-all term, and a lot of people in the graphics and news design field have kind of come up very similar ways because everything has happened in real time. It didn't really exist in the form it does now when we were in school, and that's kind of part of why these kind of trainings are important. Outside of KUOW, I'm also the content editor for Nightingale, which is the magazine for the Data Visualization Society. That is a professional organization similar to SPJ, but focused on graphics and data viz across different categories. So there are a lot of journalists in the Data Viz Society, but there are also academics and standard communicators and data analysts. So it's a larger group that all share a common skill set. And there's plenty of amazing resources available there as well. And then, as you know, I'm a board member of the Society of Professional Journalists of Western Washington Pro Chapter, which is the group that is hosting this training today. So thank you all for joining along for that. I threw up some handles and whatnot, but really this is just a quick overview for those who don't know me. And I'm going to just pop us right into it because this next part is going to require a little fiddling with everybody here. So for the remainder of our time today, this workshop is very participation based. So we are going to be using the Jamboard at this link, and I will also go ahead and copy it into the chat right now. 1 minute. Okay. It's been copied into the chat as well. If you're not familiar with Jamboard, I will explain how to use it. The link should work for everyone regardless of their Google login situation. But I'm going to go ahead and be monitoring chat and give everyone a minute now to get the Jamboard up. For those who are watching the recording, my screen will share the Jamboard. So I'm going to unshare this presentation and pop over to the Jamboard so that you're able to follow along. But obviously, if you are watching the recording, you can't participate in real time. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and get the Jamboard up. Let me know in the chat if you have any problems doing that. And I see that we had someone just join. So I'll go ahead and just put a little comment in here for folks who are just joining us. Please head to the link above. We'll be working from there. Okay, great. All righty, 1 minute here. Okay. Find where I put it. Okay. Alrighty, so you should all be seeing the Jamboard now. And if you just popped over to it, you're probably on this little intro slide. If you tap the little button up top here, you can get to slide 2 where we're at. Yes, Denver, I see your comment. Let me just pop that in the chat for you. Okay, let me know if that worked. I want to make sure everyone can get in here. All right, it looks like that worked. Is everyone else in? No problems getting in here? It looks like everyone is good. Okay. All right, so to get us started, I would just love to get a sense of the folks who are here. We're going to use one feature basically of Jamboard. So this is also a good practice for us of that feature. We are going to use, and hopefully you can see my highlighting here. We are going to be using the sticky note, which is the fourth icon down on the left-hand menu. If you tap that, it's essentially a digital Post-it note, and you can type something and it will appear on the board. So if I do that right now, I save it, I click out, it has appeared on the board. So I would love if everyone could just do a really quick sticky to get familiar with the process and just introduce, like, why are they here? What do graphics and news design, what part of your life are they? Or is this a career transition? Kind of just a quick answer from folks. Oh, and I should mention they might automatically appear in the same spot. So if folks are just can move theirs to make sure they're not covering anyone, that's a Jamboard etiquette. Great, okay. Just taking a look at these. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, ooh, we got some more. Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. Great. Okay. So now that we're all kind of comfy with that, it looks like most folks here are either already working with some level of like visual storytelling or would like to add it to their journalism, which is great. You don't need to have any prior knowledge of anything for this class. This is not a open an Excel sheet kind of thing. This is very much focused in the process strategy storytelling realm. So that's great to hear from folks. We're going to go ahead and get started. So we are here to talk about thinking like a graphics and news design journalist. And what that really means is we need to be thinking like the audience. So we are going to completely disregard our roles as journalists and whatnot right now. And I'm going to ask you to put yourself in the seat of an audience member consuming media. And we're going to do a couple of like fun little exercises there first, okay? So you can go ahead and click over to the next slide at the top right, or sorry, on the top of the screen, the right arrow. It should click you over to a map and a tree map. Okay, great. Very simple, 30-second immediate first thought. Take a sticky, place it on which graphic you like and explain why. And if you really dislike a graphic, you can explain why on that one too. You can put multiple stickies, just be mindful of other folks while you're doing that. And this is really gut reaction. It can be honest thought process. I'll give like 30 seconds to 45. Okay, so I'm looking here a little bit at what folks are saying. Okay. For the, not to call anyone out, but, and you're welcome to just put this in chat if you don't want to unmute. For the lack of colors, lack of contrast, is that referencing both maps? Is that why it's in the middle there? Okay, I see. Yeah, I like that you put it on the sticky itself. Great. Okay. All right, kind of looking at what we have here. This map shows me more and tells me more immediately. Okay. I like this map for instant information. I like this graphic because most of the information is easy to recognize. I'm just taking this in as we go. Visual set. Yeah, okay, great. All right, so we have time to read, death occupation. Okay. Yeah. So people have opinions, right, about which one they like and why. So I'm going to move some of these around very quickly just to be able to get us these these things here at the bottom. So for those who are not familiar, both of these maps appeared in a award-winning piece by the New York Times once we hit 1 million deaths from COVID. These were two of something like 30 or 40 different graphs and charts that the New York Times put together from the same data set to kind of showcase what 1 million deaths meant in a different way. The one on the left is a symbol map, which you're all probably familiar with. It looks like everyone kind of said, this is easily recognizable. I know what this is. Typically, symbol maps are used to kind of point out things like the number of McDonald's in your area. A lot of the stuff that you see on like Google or Yelp, those are versions of symbol maps, right? So the New York Times obviously applied that in a very different way here. Each dot represented a person. They wanted it to feel very visceral, and it accomplished that from what folks are saying. However, there are drawbacks to that, right? The contrast that people testing sticky note. I like that. The contrast that people are mentioning. I'll also point out a drawback of symbol maps in general is that if you're not careful, what they actually tend to show you is where people live, right? Because the reality is that if you're tracking something that affects humans writ large and you use a symbol map to do a one-to-one representation of that, you are going to be tracking where people live. And that is shown to some extent here as well, right? I don't think that detracts from the reality of it, but it is, again, pros and cons of this kind of representation. On the right, we have a tree map, which I think I saw a couple of people clock. I think there was there's one sticky that says deaths by occupation. Takes too long to digest. I think that's a great point. So personally, as a dataviz person, I loved seeing the tree map on the right. Tree maps are typically used to represent parts of a whole. So they're similar to like a pie chart, but you can get a lot more granular and interesting than you can with a pie chart. The reason this stuck out to me is that I experienced the print version, which was big and right in your face with nothing else around it. And it was an incredibly stark experience to see just how many of those deaths were essential workers. Just seeing the category of janitors and retail workers, taxi drivers, it hit home in a very particular way. But I admit that on a screen like this, hard to read. It's hard to kind of parse what's going on. The impact is lost. And I think it was a very deliberate choice from the New York Times that they made it a side piece in the online version of this story, and they made it a large part of the print version, which again is showing you how the same data applied differently and in different placements can have a huge impact on what you learn from the data. So, okay, great. We all know how to do stickies. We're going to do a couple more of these, so get your critiques ready. And I will say, if folks don't mind, like, try to get it like down to a very short sentence, like really be just like brutal and honest. because I think getting your immediate gut reactions is important for these. So we can go ahead and click over to the next one. And I'm seeing a lot of people go, I know what a bar chart is. I know immediately how to read this. Very true. Tells immediate differences. Yep. Yep. The arrow plot is harder to read. Yes. Okay, I think that's probably good. I think we get the gist of this. So a couple of things that I just wanted to point out. I don't think I need to explain what a bar chart is, but I can stand corrected. You never know. Okay, so a couple of things to note here. I'm just going to move these out of the way very quickly just to be able to showcase this. All right, so obviously I am going to agree with everyone. The one on the left is a much easier to comprehend immediate snapshot, right? It is from the same data set as the one on the right. They're actually both from the same story, which if you notice that the colors match the women and men, it's because it's all part of the same story. But there are a couple of differences in how they applied the data and a couple of things that I think both charts are worth standing out and talking about for a second. And if you can't tell, this is my sneaky way of doing do's and don'ts, best practices without actually giving you a list. I will give you a checklist later, but let's do it in real time because there's a reason that those are best practices and we're experiencing it right now. So the one on the left, something that it does really well that I don't think anyone pointed out. No, they didn't, is the title. So there was a time when the data and graphics world in its infancy of online media was saying that your title should just explain what the data is about, be very, very clear, but very neutral. Those days are over. Pretty much anyone you ask these days is going to say that the title of your chart should be as snappy as a headline. It should actually be very similar to your headline. So if you notice the title on the bar chart on the left, we have someone coming in. It literally tells you the main point about the chart, right? Really quick and to the point. And part of the reason for that is the way that people consume media these days and might skim through. And part of it is that you really want as many opportunities to get your main point across as possible. I'm going to pause very quickly because I saw that Guy joined us. Guy, if you look through the chat, and I'll pop it in here, we're using a Jamboard to participate in real time. So if you go to that link there, you should be able to catch up to where we're at. We're on slide 4 on the Jamboard. And let us know in the chat if you have any problems getting into that or anything like that. Okay, so titles should be headlines, should be clear, should guide the user. That has changed in a couple of years. The other thing I want to note is the color scheme. So obviously, very clearly, you can tell women versus men, really basic bar chart stuff. The kind of graphic theory part of this is that there's 2 main approaches to color in graphic work. You can either do color that is talking about continuous data, which is a spectrum like low to high, or least pizza to most pizza. It can be anything, but it is from like a 0 to 100. You are going along a continuous scale, and that's where people typically use hues going into darker tones, right? You've all seen charts like this, especially on maps, where like 0 is a very light color, 100 is a very dark color. That is considered a continuous color use. Then there is categorical color use, which is what we're seeing here. The color is not telling you the amount, it's telling you what category we're talking about, right? So women versus men. It works really well here because you have two, and you can easily clock them, and then you can follow them through. If you were to be reading this article, notice the colors stay the same throughout. So you can follow it through the whole article and know what they're talking about. That's great. If you have something like 30 things, that's not so great. And we'll get to that. The last thing I want to note about the chart on the right, which is an arrow plot, if anyone is familiar, these are really, the focus of these is to show a change over time. So the one on the left is showing you a snapshot from 2010. The one on the right is showing you 1990 versus 2010. And what arrow plots do well is show you the change, the drastic change. I personally, and you'll notice that I'm going to point out personal opinions a lot because there's honestly no right or wrong answer when you're building things for large audiences. There are just guidelines based on experience, and they change. The arrow plots, in my opinion, don't serve a lot of folks. They're hard to navigate. I think the only time they really work is when you are showing something like, and I'm sorry, I'm just double checking. I got a ping about someone in the chat. Okay. What they really do well is show things like parties, political parties over time, how their votes have moved. Things that are not quite so all over the place, where you can see gradual changes. So anyway, I wanted to showcase an arrow plot because it is one of the options available, but I don't actually think it does a lot of great things for people. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next one, but just for folks who are just joining us, when I click over to the next slide, use on the left-hand menu, the fourth icon down is a sticky note. If you click on that, you can type out a digital post-it and put it on the graph that you like and why. You can also note why you don't like the other graph. So we're going to click over to the next one, slide 5. And I will tell you right now, yes, they are the same graphic. There is one difference to them, I should say. Is this the font exercise? It is not. The difference is not the font, but I appreciate the person who said that. I'm just going to move this sticky off of the graph real quick. All right. Oh, see, I don't know who just put that sticky note down. This one, really interesting. We'll get into this. Great. Okay. More choices. For the person who asked, is this The Economist? It is. Isn't it interesting how you can immediately tell based on the font and the color choice without any other indicators? That is a good brand. Okay, easier to understand, follows format. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I've already said it and I will say it again. Data viz is an art, not a science. The story behind this, and it looks like the majority of folks here liked the graph on the left. Am I fair in that assessment? It kind of seems like it. The actual story behind this is that the graph on the left was the original version that The Economist put out. And then the designer who put it together decided that it was wrong and swapped it for this one on the right. And the reasoning they gave was that this goes back to the color choices I was talking about previously. So if you recall, you all honed in on the fact that you like the contrast color, but what they realized when they put it up is that it made it seem as if these are different categories. For folks who are familiar with different colors meaning different things, people were writing in asking, what does that mean? What is different about France and Italy and Brazil and China than the other ones? And the answer was nothing. The story was about these specific countries. And so they wanted to highlight those and bring them forward. So the contrast that you all were talking about, but they made the mistake of using two different colors to do that. So they redid it and had the opacity in the background on the right here higher, so you can't see those as well. You see the context of them, but they're not as prominent, and brought up the color of these up front so that it felt like it's like two different layers, right? Because what they were really trying to show was just where these countries fall within the larger context. But this was confusing people in a large enough sample size. And note that in this one, in my opinion, in this one, it's a little harder to notice that Brazil is bolded, but Brazil is bolded because if you read the title, this is actually about Brazil. Like that's Brazil in comparison to these other countries, and then you can see the rest of the countries in the background. So, you know, if you ask The Economist, this is the correct way to do the graph. If you ask this group, this is the correct way to do the graph. There is no right answer, so long as what you are getting out of it is the correct information, which gets to this. I liked contrast initially. Thank you, Taylor, for letting us know that was your comment. But now this one tells me where to look first. Exactly. Yes, that is what they want. Easier to read labels aren't sideways. That is also a really great benefit. I think that was even like a 3rd edition add-on change. Let's see. I noticed that there was one other thing that came up. I like the partial opacity. Yep, to de-emphasize some of the countries. Yeah. So again, kind of a common best practice rule that you can break when needed is if you are showing a continuity of data, you do it in the same color. That is friendlier to certain neurodivergent folks, and it's friendlier for folks with certain color blindness. So you use the same color at different hue levels. If you are trying to de-emphasize or highlight certain things, you do a similar approach, but you use opacity, which is what's happening here. You don't try to use different colors for the reason that they were getting people asking us what's going on. But again, you're going to see great examples out in the wild where people break those rules. They're guidelines, not rules. Okay. Yes, yeah. Variations of blue versus opacity are a different thing, and they play differently on different screens as well. Okay, we're going to go on to the next one. Click over to slide 6. I'm going to give you all a little more time to read this one. Okay. Very interesting, whoever wrote this one. Really, really thoughtful comment here. All of them are thoughtful, but just I'm always amazed at what people pick up in a couple of seconds of looking at something. Okay. Do folks want another second, or are we good for me to kind of start walking through this one? That's because most data involved tells a story. Wish this explained Title 8. Interesting. Oh, I mean, that's a great trade-off. Whoever wrote this, this one's simpler, but other one I learned more. These are not exact, these are not the same data set, obviously. They're just in a family of topics. I like how it, okay. Guiding the viewer through the various hurdles. Interesting, talking about hurdles. Okay. Great. All right, I thought there were some, I'm just going to read them out because I thought they were really helpful, really insightful things. This comment, I feel like this graph doesn't give the full context and makes it seem like Europe and Asia are losing population at the expense of Africa. Yeah, so yeah, let's get into these two. Let's get a little, I'm going to have a hot take here. And again, as I've said, all of these are hot takes because there is no right answer. Just ask The Economist. Okay, so obviously this is not the same story, but a couple of things I want to point out. The chart on the left is an area chart, which you're probably familiar with. You've probably seen out in the wild in some variation. Area charts are similar to line charts, but they allow you to show how totals and values have changed over time as well. There is a common refrain in the graphics community that the saying, this could have been an email. Most area charts could have been a line chart and people would have understood it a lot better. There's very particular data sets that work well for area charts. For one, you need to have pretty drastic changes for the sizing to actually matter. So here we do, obviously, there's big shifts. Area charts are great when you're also showing projection because they can do things that certain stacked bar charts can't. But for the most part, people misinterpret area charts often. It's a common problem, and it kind of defeats the purpose of putting it into a chart. So I will say that this example, I had to look pretty hard. I'm reading my notes to see if I wrote down how many other area charts I looked at, but I didn't write it down. It's very difficult to find an area chart that doesn't mislead the reader. The population demographic world is kind of a great space for area charts. This is one of the best examples of an area chart. It's more useful as an area chart than a line chart because you do understand how these makeups change. But overall, generally speaking, area charts are dangerous because they seem like very easy, a step up from a line chart, but they actually require a lot of thought to make sure that you are not misrepresenting the data in them. The other thing I'll note about this particular area chart, even though I think it was done really well, and notice that it is using some version of categorical coloring, right, based on region, it is also doing a thing called highlighting. So it's clearly trying to highlight Africa. All of these are in this lighter palette, and then Africa is in this bright red to kind of point your eye to it. Highlighting is a great way to, again, like hit your reader, or your audience, I should say, over the head with whatever your main point is. But I think that in this case, it's not very useful in an area chart because you're trying to show people over time how things have changed. The other thing I'll note is, did anyone notice that these two gray bars had no labels on them? That's because this is an interactive chart, right? It's a data wrapper chart. There's great interactivity options with data wrapper. We'll we'll talk about data wrapper a little bit later. But they didn't translate to the printed version of it. And so this is one of those considerations in the do's and don'ts, best practices. What is the static version of your chart and what is the interactive add-on features? What are people only going to know if they hover over or if they're at the right screen size? I will say, you know, regardless of what the data is, that this does follow that rule of like your title needs to be closer to a headline. It needs to actually explain what you're trying to show people. So the one on the right, great, yep, yes, yeah, Guy, you're absolutely correct. And oftentimes it happens with area charts because it's very nuanced to get them right. For folks who are wondering, Guy put a great comment in the Zoom chat. On the right, we have my favorite chart. I am biased. Take everything I say with a grain of salt, but Sankey diagrams are the best thing ever made, and you should all be using more of them. Sankey diagrams are in a category of graphs and charts that show flows of information or flows of things. They're typically used to show money flowing. So they're great for big investigative pieces where you're looking through a lot of budgets and you're trying to explain to people where money came from and where it went. But they also get used often in things like explaining a system with barriers. Or someone here said hurdles. Yeah, they're great at that because they show all the points in the process where people are left behind. So a lot of reporting would benefit from, and a lot of communication would benefit from having more Sankey diagrams. It's interesting that I picked this one because typically Sankey diagrams are actually horizontal, so they go left to right rather than, I was about to say north to south, top to bottom. But lately there's been a trend because of phones to make them vertical. The New York Times also did one recently about a river that was being siphoned off by multiple communities before it hit Mexico and made a Sankey diagram describing it that also served as a visual representation of the river. So you can get quite artistic with these. So this Sankey diagram obviously is showing, like the title says, America's broken immigration system. This is where I think the title as headline might have gone a little too far in that this doesn't actually give you a definitive, more data-driven title here. I think they could have done a better job with that. But yes, Sankey diagrams are great for showing these kind of flows. Sankey diagrams have pretty strict, unlike some of the other things that we've talked about, pretty strict rules about how to make them legible. For starters, there are color combinations that you should use and color combinations that you shouldn't because of the way that these kind of offshoots work, and any program you're using to make them, which again, I'll get into later, will have those pre-built. The other thing is that you really have to have this opacity leveling to them, right? Which for digital is not really a big deal, but when we get into the print world, you start to get into finicky printing standards with Sankey diagrams. So they are a little trickier. Okay, I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, oh yeah, please make more budget graphs using Sankey diagrams. They're great for that. Okay, and I'm seeing a lot of people say, wish this explained title A. Yeah, all hail the Sankey diagram. I'm not biased at all. Okay, we're gonna move on to, I believe this might be nope, not our last one. I lied, but we can go ahead and go click over one more. Same thing. Which ones you like, you didn't like. I'll tell you right now, it's the same data. And yes, Denver, the video will be shared out. I also have a cheat sheet of resources and tutorials that I'll be sending out via email. So if you registered for this, you put your email down, you'll get an email with this kind of big cheat sheet that I'll talk about in a minute. If for some reason you've made it to our Zoom and did not register, please put your email in the chat or send it to me, and I will make sure that you also get that information. Ooh, a lot of thoughts. Okay. Everyone has thoughts on maps. Mm, all right. Yeah, I'm seeing people say that it's assuming the reader knows the values. Oh, haha. This is extra points for whoever said this. This graph prioritizes geography and is not appropriate since it doesn't color code per proportion. Someone is probably too advanced to be in this class if you caught that right away. I'm kidding, but no, that's exactly right. We'll get to it in a second. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Everyone caught on. It just took it takes a second. Okay. Easier to read and break. Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading some of these type of data. Yep. Everyone is pretty familiar with the choropleth maps. Okay. All right. So I cheated. These both are terrible maps, and I'll explain why. Regardless of how you feel about either map, they are misrepresenting the data in both of these. So if you read the quite unclear text here, it is saying that this is representing unemployment in California. And it says on the left-hand side, we'll start with the choropleth map. It is saying the darker the color, the larger the number of unemployed persons. Now, that sentence itself is not very clear. What is the data supposed to be? The county or there you go. This is not the unemployment rate. This is the number of unemployed persons, which is an absolute number. So if there's 1,000 people, it's 1,000. If there's, so this hones Lola, I cheated, but both the yeah. Okay. So choropleth maps, the one on the left, we're all quite familiar. They're very popular, especially in Seattle. I feel like I see them all the time. They're great for a couple of things. For starters, they show regional patterns, which we all love, especially in our region. What part of it you live in makes a huge impact. So we all kind of know that inherently, especially within Seattle, but also Washington. They're really good at comparing one value. So if you had the unemployment rate and you put that per county, district, whatever breakdown you wanted, it could tell you something valuable, right? The unemployment rate would be the number of unemployed people, taking into account the population of that city, district, whatever it is that whatever these outlines are, right? And then you could actually compare what's happening. They give you that big picture because you really can just look at the color and go, it's a lighter in this area, so there's less unemployment there. Okay, you don't need to think about numbers. That's kind of the joy of these kind of maps. However, they need to be using relative data. And by relative data, I mean things like the unemployment rate. They need to take into account the population of the area. Otherwise, you fall into the pitfall that we mentioned a little bit in that New York Times COVID map. This is the absolute number of unemployed people. I don't think it's a surprise that Southern California in this region might have more people if there's larger cities there, right? So what ends up happening is that you are connecting geography and people in the wrong way when you do this. And it's a very easy mistake to make, especially when you get really excited with the data set you have. So I wanted to point it out because it happens all over the place. I've seen it in our site. I've seen it in the New York Times. It's just a thing that happens. This title, where do California's unemployed people live? Yes, because what it is showing you is population. The one on the right, this is a symbol map. Again, that New York Times piece from earlier was also a symbol map. Both of these symbol map like both examples that I gave have used this circle because that's the default on Data Wrapper, frankly. But the symbol part of a symbol map means it could be anything. You could take all of the locations of national parks and get the badge for that park and have those placed where the park is. So symbol maps are really valuable in helping you locate like more pinpoint things. They also have the ability to add a variable in that you could show size. So you could show the unemployment rate by size with these circles and have the size of the circle represent how big that is for that area. But again, you want to make sure you're using relative data, not absolute data. Because again, what now you're seeing, whereas here you're seeing population by whatever county district, I honestly have no idea what it was here. Here you're seeing it by essentially city, right? That's what you're getting. You're getting all of the like Bay Area stuff. You're getting all the like Southern California stuff. You're not actually learning anything, and you might be misunderstanding what's happening. You're definitely misunderstanding what's happening. So for both of these map types, it's very important to make sure that you're showcasing relative data. To the point, I saw someone say the circle, like they had questions about the circles. Yeah, the circles overlapping again is just if the way they had this was circle of this size means 100 people, circle of this size means 1,000 people, there will be overlaps in that, which is also confusing if you are trying to map something like unemployment. So again, not the best use for this map. I will say that one thing that choropleth maps on the left do really well when it's done correctly is that, you know, we've mentioned a bit about how you can use the continuous, like a hue spectrum to do low to high, like the 0 to 100 type thing. You can also use it for what's called divergent coloring. And that means the way that most people are familiar with it is in weather. So a divergent color pattern would be you have all your coldest temperature in blue on one side of your scale and your hottest temperature in bright red on the other side, and in the middle is like gray or is like a very neutral color to show like the extremes versus the kind of normal range. And that is a version of divergent color scheming, which is still using hues, but it's slightly different. And choropleth maps are great for that as well. Again, all of this is like you have to really spend the time to do it, but I wanted to make sure I pointed out one of the common pitfalls when we get really excited to do maps. I will also point out one other benefit of the symbol map over the choropleth map that is probably more useful for this audience, which is that if if you're familiar with Data Wrapper or Flourish, both of them have a choropleth map option. And there are a lot of pre-built, each of these shapes is a shape layer. A lot of them are pre-built maps, so they'll have your districts. They have like the city council districts, they have the school districts. Most of the things that you're trying to track will be in the free version. However, things like Seattle neighborhoods will not be. So if you want to show something like the unemployment rate by Seattle neighborhood, you need to source the shapes yourself, the shape layer, the shape file yourself. Those exist, but unless you are a more advanced data viz person and you're more comfortable with ArcGIS and some other items, that's probably not going to be in your time frame or your skill set, and you will need to purchase that. But you would purchase it one time and be able to use it multiple times. But I thought it was important to point that out. Yeah, you can, but the updated versions of them to work can be tricky. So there's there's shortcuts that require money, as with many things. There's a lot of, I mean, Guy is right, you can get King County, Seattle open data for some of it. I have not found accurate Seattle neighborhood maps that way, in terms of how vernacular, like in the vernacular Seattle neighborhoods are. Of course, everyone has their own opinion of what counts as a Seattle neighborhood, but there are sites which again will be in that cheat sheet where you can also purchase what other people have made. They've made their own shape files for very specific use cases. And there's online tutorials of how to make your own as well to answer Denver's question. And Guy, if you have other resources, feel free to plug them in there too. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing there's a couple of other questions in here. I'm going to look through them now. If you were to present this data without a graphic map, how would you do it? Was that related to this, Denver? You asked if you were to present this data without a graphic map, how would you do it? Is that for this unemployment?
Yeah, like if you were gonna present this data with like a map or a graphic or something, like which one would you choose? I guess.
Ooh, kind of, well, we're gonna all do a little bit of that together in the second half, which I do want to get, I want to make sure we get to. My gut reaction would be that I would never plot just pure unemployment, like the number of people that are unemployed, because I don't think that's helpful. I would probably plot the unemployment rate. My first thought would be either to do that by map, but by a choropleth map, but with unemployment rate, or to answer your question, I would probably do it by industry. I'd be way more interested. I would probably do like a standard stacked bar chart by industry. Where are these unemployment numbers, right? Just basic unemployment rate doesn't tell me much if it's affecting a very particular industry, right? So that would be my immediate thought to look into. What's with our advertising design? Okay, yes, Michael, we will be getting to that to your question about, are you using automated? We're about to get there, I promise. Would you be willing to make a tip sheet of resources for yeah, we're also going to have that. You get the cheat sheet after going through the course. Yes, list of tools and cheat sheet. I've used, yep. Yeah, well, Guy, to answer your question, it's just as brutal to make your own custom shape files. Let me tell you, that was a life I led at one point. Well, that's like a whole other course. We can deal with that another time. Okay, we're gonna move on for time to the next one. All the questions that I've seen in the chat will be answered, so you will get your answers. All right, if we click over, we're gonna do this last one, second to last one, very quickly. Same deal, 2 seconds, pick one. I don't want to hear what you don't like about the other one, just pick one and say why, and then we'll chat about it. Cool. The no is really, I like the attitude. That's good. Okay. Tell me what I need to know, but is missing time frame of years. Okay. Great. All righty. So just a little bit on these two. Technically, these two are in very different graphing categories. The one on the left is a heat map. Well, I guess technically different categories, but the one on the right is a line chart, as you all know. But both of these are actually in kind of a newer category in the data viz world called magnitude. And it's essentially like the wow factor. It's things that will immediately make your data stand out. And you might have seen either of these at some point. The one on the right is a bit older. It is the updated version of the quote hockey stick graph for climate change, which was developed quite a while ago and has been refined in various ways. But what it does is kind of show you not just how how we are doing now, but the projection, right? The kind of astronomical projection of the future. And it is meant to be to be visually stark. It is meant to be alarming. It is supposed to show you the magnitude of what's happening. The one on the left, the heat map, it's technically a heat map, but it's actually called climate stripes. It's become its own category of data viz. And essentially what they did was, they took each vertical stripe and color coded it to represent the average temperature of that year. To be fair to the chart maker, I think I pulled the numbers out of the bottom when I screenshotted it. They did have them originally. But this is a newer kind of let's show you how much warmer each year is getting. It came out in 2018, so very new for, if you think about the data viz world continuously changing and growing, this was a new thing in 2018. So you can still create new, hugely impactful things simply by kind of thinking through what data you have and what impact you want to make. And I will say that I do not think it's a coincidence that the two of the most iconic charts of the last 15 plus years are about climate change. I think the climate change data viz community is especially focused on big wow factor magnitude impact graphics. So if you are coming into the field of data viz and graphics and really want to see kind of innovative, cutting edge stuff, I would follow some climate scientist folks, some climate data viz folks, because they are, I think for them, it's kind of a life or death thing. So they are really pushing the limits of design, and I think in a good way. Okay, we're going to go to our last one as an audience, and then we're going to switch over to being the people making the thing. Okay, for this one, there's only one. All I want you to do is put a sticky next to the first thing that caught your eye and tell me why. And then we'll talk about it. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of the dark wavy data line because it's bolded. The point where it hit the record, standout data. Yep, bolded text. The shape of the dip downwards. Yeah. Okay. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's where your eye goes. This is, again, innovative work happening in the climate change realm of data viz. Show the change, either climate change. So, yeah, it doesn't. No, this is very focused on the ice. There is a lot going on here. So the reason I wanted to bring this one up is because this is in a category that we haven't really talked about much. Sometimes Sankey diagrams fall into this category too, but this is, there's kind of like two ways that you can imagine your audience interacting with a graphic. One is a very like guided narrative. You are pointing their eye to something that you want them to see, and you want them to get it immediately. And then if they catch anything else, great, but really it's that one hit point, right? And that is a lot of what we've seen here. And honestly, that's just a lot of the data viz world, because the purpose of adding graphics usually is to kind of make that point very clear for folks. But there's also especially with the advent of more interactive data viz, exploratory data viz, where the goal is that you actually sit with it a second. You still have something that you immediately grab onto, but then you kind of connect off to the next thing. So if you look here, for everyone who said that they were drawn into this, that's on purpose. That was what the creator of this graph wanted. I mean, it's not going to happen for everyone, but for a lot of folks, they get here, they see this immediate data point. Maybe their eye goes down here to read this, maybe, let's hope. And then they might continue on left to right because of the nationality of the person who, and the cultural background of the person who put this together. And then you might end up slowly guiding your way through this whole experience, right? The goal here is not so much to give you an immediate impact, it's to hit you over the head with Arctic ice. Arctic ice, the number of times that they are talking about the ice shrinking here, you essentially are reading an article in a chart. They could publish this as almost an entire piece with like a paragraph attached. This is a form of exploratory data viz that has become more popular recently, and that can be executed even by folks who don't code because of the use of, these are called annotations. And if you, I don't like how I don't know where to look first. Yeah, I get that. It's a little nerve-wracking, right? If you're a completionist, you're like, well, then I get to read it all, I guess. That's me, which I don't like, but some people do. These text boxes that you see everywhere, these are called annotations. They're available in DataWrapper and Flourish, and they're usually used sparingly, like you pick one thing you want to point out, but here they're almost using it to walk you through paragraphs of content. And that in and of itself is kind of a new approach to this. I'll also note that they're using some of that color theory we talked about, right? They want you to pay attention to first this black line, then these blue lines, and then the other stuff is there for context, right? And instead of doing it with opacity filters like we saw before, they are using gray to gray out, which is technically against like best practices. But again, best practices are there so that you know how that works, and then you can change it to whatever you want. Okay, great. So we can skip ahead to the next one, and I'm going to barrel through a bit because we are running a little behind. Sorry about that. Whoops. Okay. So why did I have us do all of that? The essence of it is that my goal for this is not so much to teach you how to do everything. It is to teach you why people do things the way that they do. I know that there's a lot of journalists on this call who probably have very specific graphic goals, like I've been trying to make this chart forever and I just need to know how to make this shape layer, or whatever. And to that I say I understand. That is like the backbone of how I built my career, was to see something I loved, try to make it, learn how to make it, and then move on from there. And for that reason, I'm not leaving any of those folks behind. The cheat sheet that will be sent out after this course will have pretty much any graphic you can make for free without coding from DataWrapper or Flourish. There will be a tutorial linked, as well as best practices, as well as my favorite accessibility guide and color guide, all the like a whole starter pack of everything you need, again, to do everything for free using tools that you can sign up yourself today. All of that will be in the cheat sheet, but I really want us to focus on why. Why do we make the choices that we do, so that you get to a point where you are not copying something you've seen someone else do, but instead thinking through something new yourself, because then you become the innovator, and we desperately need more of that in this field. And that is my 2-second elevator pitch. Let me just make sure I didn't leave anything out. Nope. Okay, great. So again, if for whatever reason your email is not with SBJ and you want that cheat sheet, just send it to me via the Zoom chat and I'll make sure that you get it. Okay. Now we're actually going to do a thing, and we have 20 minutes to do it. So I'm going to keep us really on task. All right. It is Monday morning. You have sat down at your desk and this prompt is in front of you. Maybe you reported it, maybe someone else did and handed it to you. But Metropolis has doubled the number of parks in Berkshire and Toy Meadows. Oh boy, along with this data you have been given from the city of Metropolis. I'm going to give you all 5 minutes, digest, okay, let's say 6.5, digest, look through this, and then I want you to put one sticky. Why should you care? What is the most important thing from the above? And I'll note I was being cute with my table titles. Pop just means the population of that neighborhood. And the average income is the average income of that neighborhood. And there's 4 neighborhoods listed: Rough Bluffs, Meow Marina, Berkshire, Toy Meadows. I had fun with this, I'm sorry. Bone inflation is wild, yes. Okay, we got some good stuff in here. I see a lot of people pointing out that, you know, some of these higher income areas have more parks per capita. An imbalance is happening there. Yeah. Lower income areas have less park resources than others, even though they both had technically the number of their parks doubled, right? How much did this cost? That's a great question that isn't included. Huh. Okay. Let's see. Higher income areas with more parks already are still getting more parks, even though population hasn't grown that much. Yep. Yep. Okay. So as a group, we're going to pick one of these to be our most important thing to know to move on to the next section. This is a group effort, so, you know, feel free to advocate for what you think is best here. I'm going to say that I think this one here does a good job of kind of synthesizing what a lot of the post-its are saying, but happy to be persuaded. Otherwise, if folks want to unmute, or it's probably easier just for time to just unmute if you disagree or want to advocate for another one. If not, we'll pick it and move to the next step. Okay. Not seeing any arguments against that, I'm going to go ahead and copy this sticky and pop us over to the next page, slide 12. Okay. Great. Alrighty. So we looked at the data and we noticed that the higher income areas obviously have more parks already and are still getting them. So the per capita park situation is not great, and that is not technically listed here. We would have to do that math ourselves. I'm going to point out a couple of other things that, thinking like a news and graphics person first comes to mind with me. This chart was given to us from the city, right? It doesn't list the money, how much it costs to make these. It also does not list the quality of the parks. So, I'll play devil's advocate here. Let me get my little highlighter. I think we all noticed this and felt that this was a disparity. And from this data, it certainly looks that way, right? However, what if this one park is Central Park? Like, what if it's a huge park? We have no concept of what these numbers actually correlate to, right? Is it 8 parks, but 3 of them are a 1x1 square, and then there's only one of them that has an agility course? What are the actual activities and benefits and size of these parks? That would be the kind of thing that I would immediately go and try to find, because if I'm asking myself, I'm going to pop us back over to 11 really quickly. And Great Point Denver, are all of them actually accessible to the public, or are some of them private parks? Great. Let's assume that these are all public parks just for our sake, but that's a great question. Moving us back here to what's the most important thing to know. Why should you care? There is the obvious factor when you look at this from a journalist perspective, but from an audience perspective, I think I would want to know what amenities are available in the parks in my neighborhood now, right? I think that is an immediate question that the audience would have, because they are not looking at this chart. They are seeing this headline, right? They are seeing this press release. So what is the most important thing that we need to make sure people know? It's this. But what is less important but useful is probably something along the lines of what is actually available in these parks, right? Which is data that we are not given. We would need to go find. And again, this was me cheating a little bit because I didn't put it there specifically, because most of the time you're not given it. So I'm going to go ahead and add a sticky here for what is less important but more useful, but useful, and say amenities or quality of the parks, or qualities of each park / the new parks. Another thing we don't know is how well kept these parks are, right? You might have 8 parks, but if 6 of them are not usable anymore because everything in them is broken. I'm sorry, someone is absolutely like honking their horn right outside my window. Okay, if folks have another one along those lines, like think outside of just what's given here. Think about like if this was a real thing happening in your neighborhood, is there anything else that we think is useful? When I say what's your data darling, that's kind of this category of like, look, this is a thing that only I care about, or that I think everyone should know, but definitely is not the main point happening here. And, to your point, Denver, maybe the private versus public park comparison would be one of them. These are the public parks, but hey, how many private parks are in these richer neighborhoods, especially, right? That could be your data darling point. If folks want to add one here just for the practice of it, this would be the time. And oh boy, we have 10 minutes left. Okay, I'm going to give us 15 seconds. Go. I'm going to talk out loud while folks are doing this. Yeah, location of parks. We don't know how big these parks are. We also don't know how big these neighborhoods are. Indoor, outdoor, yep. Especially depending on the weather in Metropolis. What about transit? If a neighborhood is huge and all the parks are in one part of the neighborhood. for big dogs or small dogs. Yep. Yeah. What kind of amenities? I think these are all great. Okay, if folks can take their how accessible, yep. If folks can take their specific sticky and copy it over to the next slide, that would be great. So the way you do that, if you haven't done it before, is you select it and then you literally do like control copy or command copy on your computer and you can move it over to the next one. Treatments, yeah. Yeah, safety. Safety is a big one too. I am going to move the amenities and the higher income ones over for us. But if folks can move theirs, I would appreciate it and plop it into that top area. I know it's gonna be a little crowded. And if yours has already been kind of represented by someone else's, let's keep it kind of clean in there. Okay, great. I'm going to say that how far away, and feel free to tell me otherwise, but for time, how far away are the parks from one another, and location of parks is the same thing in this context? Okay, I'm seeing a nod, so I'm just going to cover one with the other. Actually, I'm just going to pull up the location ones if that's okay. I'm just going to, boop, sorry. Indoor, outdoor, yeah. How accessible, amenities, how recently refurbished. Yeah, I think these are all great. I'm going to say that for big dogs versus small dogs is part of the amenities available. If folks are okay with that, great. Okay, awesome. So we already have here, what's our most important thing? What's our less important, interesting thing? I'm going to throw a couple of other real world stuff, things at us, and that's this parameter section. So you're publishing to web and Instagram, which means similar to what we talked about earlier, interactive elements versus static elements. A lot of space, not a lot of space. A lot of time to explore, 2 seconds. They better like it. Your audience is regional, so you can use catchy hooks. You can assume a certain level of familiarity, and you have 15 hours to both clean that data, find it, design this, and test that it actually works on your site, which will immediately eliminate a lot of things you can do, but that's the reality of where we're at. Okay, so I'm going to slightly change the rest of this because we only have 7 minutes, but I think it will still be just as useful. So when I'm actually building things, this is the actual process I go through. I try to figure out what is my most important point that I know I need to showcase. What is something else that I want to make sure people get? Can I put them in the same graphic, or are those going to be 2 separate ones, depending on how much space I have? That is the legitimate way that I do my job. What is helpful when you're starting out is I already kind of can guess what would make sense if I'm like really thinking through it, especially if I already have the data. But if you're just starting out, it's helpful to know what graphs are meant for what purposes broadly, very broadly. And we did talk about most of these already, so I'm going to be very quick here, but graphs or maps are geographical patterns. We talked about some of the benefits of a symbol versus a choropleth. The one we didn't talk about in examples is a locator. That's typically used for like very hyper-specific, like the walking path from one place to another. So usually this has to do with, you know, if an incident happened somewhere, like there was a bus crash somewhere and you're trying to explain like where the bus route went, things like that. Again, all of these are available in the free versions of Data Wrapper or Flourish. Nothing shown here needs money. The flows, I've talked about Sankey diagrams. The other one is networks, which are pretty self-explanatory. Parts of a whole, pie charts are also included in this, but we all know what a pie chart is. Tree maps, we talked about them. Waffle chart is percentage of a whole visually. Stacked bars are great because you can show out of 100 here, this is the amount that said yes, this is the amount that said I don't know, this is the amount that said no, things like that. I'm not going to explain these because we went through them, except fan projection, you can teleport into the future. This is similar to what happened with that climate change graph, right? Arrow plots we talked about. Split bars, you can split like survey results. So X number of people said yes, other people said no. Scatter plots, I think people are familiar with. Anyway, there's a larger version of this in that cheat sheet that gives you every single graphic you can make in Data Wrapper and Flourish broken up into these categories to help you pick things and try out new charts without misrepresenting data. Okay, but for what we're going to do in 2 minutes of time, we are going to pick what we think, what kind of graph from what we've seen or what you know out in the world would make sense to represent this, which I'll make bigger now. Higher income areas with more parks already are getting more parks than, oh, sorry. Higher income areas with more parks already are still getting more parks. So higher income areas have a higher per capita park ratio, right? That's what that means. What do we all think would be a way to represent that? You can unmute, you can put it in the chat. I really want people to put themselves out there a bit.
I think it depends on if we're trying to focus on geography or focus on the change over time. So if we're trying to show the change over time, I'd probably go with one of the bottom ones, maybe like a line chart. But if we're trying to do like geography, I might look at doing something else.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. That's a great point because we do have multiple years of data. Within the Flourish versions of maps, you do have a time interpolator. So you essentially you can show all of the parks within their neighborhoods in 2020 versus 2024 and have it toggle back and forth. So you can have the best of both worlds for that. That is an option. But I love the thought process there. Is like, are you showing them changing over time or literally what is currently being added to these neighborhoods? Scatter plot for how many parks, which neighborhoods? Yep. Okay. Yeah. And I'm just gonna add a couple of thoughts here. Sorry that we're running so late on time. We had great convos earlier. I would say that the purpose of the higher income and how it connects to the parks per capita, I would probably spell that out very specifically in some sort of like bar chart or split bar graph where people can literally see this neighborhood has this much money and this many parks in comparison to these other places. It's not on here because it's a more advanced version, but there's a thing called a symbol chart, which is just big circles. You could represent this neighborhood has a huge park per capita versus this neighborhood, and then color code it by income bracket. And then you are showing both, right? You could use a tree map to do a very similar thing to show which neighborhoods are eating up the most parks per capita, things like that. I would do two, from Guy in the chat, I would do 2 identical charts showing the relationship between the income and parks per capita for each year. Choropleth map if you want to show both income and number of parks. Yep. So for some of these other things, like the amenities, I think that's where a symbol map might be really nice, right? Where you can have different symbols for different types of parks in those neighborhoods. And you would then be able to create like a hierarchy of parks based on like, some of them are probably very small and don't have a lot of things and others do. And I think that if you're an audience member looking for parks, that's the map you're going to go to, right? And then maybe you stick around to see that historically your neighborhood has either benefited greatly or been screwed. I'm going to go ahead. We are at time. If folks can stay for a hot minute and have other ideas that they'd like to get out there, I would love to hear them. This does not need to be the end of this exercise for you. Feel free to sit and think through what else you would create with these less important, interesting pieces, because I think that's where this job gets interesting and is also very useful for the public, because everyone's going to come up with this first one and make it. So I'm opening up the floor if anyone else wants to chat through their idea and can stay. Mm-hmm. Okay. I know, it's putting folks on the spot. Yes, Hillary, I will absolutely have the packet. What would you do? I'm happy to talk through some ideas if folks are done giving me theirs. Okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, for the amenities, like I said, I would do a symbol map. I think for the location of the parks, I would probably do two different things. This is where I would actually combine an arrow plot with a map to show the time it would take you from the center of each neighborhood to get to each of these parks. If I had the time, which I don't because we're talking about 15 hours, but if I did have the time, let's say I had 40 hours, I would also probably factor in walking versus, I guess, running because we're talking about dogs rather than buses. But I think that that's a difference that matters for folks. For the accessibility, I would probably engage my one of my favorites here, the tree map, and recategorize each park per each neighborhood with their parks per accessibility. So like what you can actually do in each park, so that you see how many of them are accessible quite immediately, and then have it be a toggle where you can go through the neighborhoods. That's just off the top of my head. I would definitely, this is where I would sit and ideate. But those are a couple of things that I would think about doing outside of just the standard showing where the parks are on the map or doing a bar chart variation or line chart variation that shows the income versus park per capita, which I think is still very important to show. Okay, we are 3 minutes past time and I want to be respectful of that for folks. Apologies that we ran late. If we pop over to the next slides, I was going to have us go through what our title would be for these and what color combinations would be. I'm going to leave that for folks if they want to do it themselves, but this is essentially a little checklist here to think through every time that you are creating things for web versus Instagram or print, because they actually have a lot of the same rules outside of color coding. Yay, thanks, Guy. And this all will be part of that presentation, and the checklist is part of the cheat sheet, more well put out. So I'll pop through these. And then just landing on our last slide about SPJ again, I will send out the cheat sheet tomorrow for folks. It will have everything on there, including like if you've never even heard of Data Wrapper before today, all the way to like, how do I make shape files? Because that's important. Okay. Thank you all for coming along on this journey. If anyone wants to stick around for questions, I will stick around for like 5 minutes of questions that don't have to pertain to the dog example.
I missed the first 20 minutes. Will you have like a recording?
Yes, we are recording it and I'll send that link out as well.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Oh, thanks. These are very nice comments. Yes, you do have to supply your email. You should have, if you registered for this Zoom, you did supply your email. So this is just if someone passed off the Zoom link to you and you got in that way. And if anyone has any harder questions about specific graphics, I will happily answer them now too.
Thank you. It was so good. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I learned so much.
Yay, I'm glad. We'll see about that. It might become a university course, but longer. Guy, to your answer. Okay. I am seeing no other questions. Nobody wants to ask me about why I didn't put cartograms on here as a map option. Okay, all right. You guys are being too easy on me. Okay, great. Well, then I'm gonna go ahead and kind of consider that I've given time for questions. And yep, you'll all receive an email either early tomorrow or late tomorrow, depending on how my day goes. Thank you all for participating in this. I hope it was helpful. And yeah, shoot me any questions you have about graphics outside of this. I will happily do my best to answer them.
Oh, you were saying it was
everyone.
going to be a college course, maybe? Oh, sorry.
Yes, it might become a college course.
Oh, I hope
Yes.
so. Okay.
Yeah, so this was a sneak peek at what will become a 4-day-a-week class.
Mm,
All right. Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
I will stop screen sharing and end our meeting.